suppose you've had one of those nightmares. Tell me, what was it about?
It's only fragments. Nothing's clear.
Hello there. Have you fallen into an open manhole recently? Do you find yourself in the company of strangers? Well, then you might very well be in the feature underground. My name is Hunter Lanier. I am the king of this sewer, and today I will be giving you a very special early review of Dune: Part 2. I'll start with this. I think Dune Part 2 is to put it simply, a very, very good movie. But to provide context for the rest of the review, I would like to give you my thoughts on the first movie, which I think provides some valuable context around why I liked the second movie. I did not like the first movie, and I was surprised that I did not like it. I'm a big fan of Denis, Mr. V. I think he really hasn't missed movies like Sicario, Prisoners, Blade Runner 2049. So my problems with the first movie, and I even rewatched it before I saw Dune Part 2, just in case it was the kind of movie that benefited from a second viewing, and also just to remind myself of the lore and the world and the characters. Number one, which is a big one, I think Timothée Chalamet has virtually no screen presence. I think he has no on-screen charisma. Like everyone else, I thought he was very good in Call Me By Your Name, but that was a very particular type of performance and a very particular type of character and a very particular type of movie. And I don't think he translates to leading man. That's an issue since he's the main character around which the whole movie revolves. Also, a smaller issue was the music. I don't like the soundtrack. I don't like the bass, that Christopher Nolan, Hans Zimmer-y, loud bass, obnoxious soundtrack. And that does carry over to Part 2. But also, my main issue with the first movie is that it feels too much like the beginning of a story, and without a middle or an end. It's very plot focused, and yet the plot, there's no resolution, there's no real feeling of momentum, and I already don't like plot heavy movies. And if your movie is plot heavy and the plot just kind of stagnates and doesn't really give me a reason to care about the characters or the world, that's a big issue for me. And so the movie doesn't really have anything that I can grasp. The characters aren't that interesting in the first movie. Everyone feels very much like an archetype and not an interesting one. I also don't think the first movie has memorable set pieces. So the first movie just doesn't work for me. Now, let's get to Part 2, where everything changes. Now, what doesn't change is that Chalamet is still the main character and that the music is still obnoxious to me. But everything else, there are huge improvements. Let's start with the set pieces. This movie actually has really memorable, thrilling, inventive set pieces, which is very important for a big blockbuster spectacle movie. Obviously, I'm not going to spoil them, but there's just for instance, the movie opens with a pretty cool action sequence. And then there's a cooler one a little bit after this. They're trying to shoot down a helicopter and they're using another of the giant vehicles as cover. It's very well directed in that it's thrilling and you have a great sense of where everyone is, what the objective is. You know, everything's very clear and exciting. It's one of the unsung heroes of great set pieces is just a director being able to communicate where everything is, where all the moving parts are, what's doing what. And that brings me to the biggest improvement and the reason I really, really like this movie, which is it really does a phenomenal job with the political intrigue aspect of the story in this world, which is something that you don't get a lot of in the first movie, or you only get hints of, but you don't, if you haven't read the books, if you haven't seen the David Lynch movie, which I have, but I don't remember it. But in the second movie, you really start to get a sense of all the different factions. You have the Charlotte Rampling, witch faction. You have the Christopher Walken faction, who are like the establishment in the universe. You have the albino, baldy supervillain faction. You have the Fremen, who are the honorable but underpowered kind of grassroots resistance, who are themselves split into the religious and the secular. And then you have Paul, who's kind of on this course all his own, who's really the kind of fly in the soup that has existed for however many years. Now that you kind of you get a very clear sense of who everyone is and what they want and how they're moving pieces on the board, it elevates everything else in the movie. It makes the set pieces more thrilling because you understand what the stakes are, and you understand, oh, if someone pulls off this move, then this person's going to do this person, it'll affect this thing, right? And then it elevates the characters, because all of a sudden you get a sense of who the characters are in reaction to the world. You get a sense of the characters in contrast to all the political machinations happening. And who are they, and what do they want, and how does it conflict with this person, and how does it conflict with this fraction, and just all of this. It makes the world interesting, and it made me excited to see the third movie, which I wasn't after seeing the first movie. And even Paul, who in the first movie, once you combine it with Chalamet's lack of charisma, he's really kind of an empty vessel in the first movie. I found he's just kind of a generic chosen one hero of these types of movies. But in Dune Part 2, he starts to form opinions, and you get a sense of his inner conflict of wanting power but not too much power, and being afraid of what power can do to you. And then all of a sudden, by the end of the movie, he's an interesting main character. And not only do I think Dune Part 2 is a great movie, but I think it's actually the type of movie that makes the first movie better. Because now the first movie, I still don't think it works as a standalone movie, but it works as a first act to a 3-act story. One last thing that I wanted to touch upon, going back to Chalamet's complete zero lack of leading man ability, what makes it even worse is that he's surrounded by actors who actually do have on-screen presence and charisma. Javier Bardem, Zendaya, Rebecca Ferguson. All of these people are actually interesting to watch. But one of them I want to point out specifically is Austin Butler, who plays one of the aforementioned baldy albino supervillains. There are two types of great villains. There are the villains who are complex, they have conflicting motivations, and maybe they're not all bad, they're a good person who does bad things. There's some nuance to their villainy, and you can maybe even sympathize with them a little bit. Then there are the villains like Austin Butler's character in this movie, whose name I will now look up because I have no idea. Okay, the name of his character is Fade Rotha. I hope I said that right. But it's not important. This type of villain is not nuanced, not complex. He's just a scenery-chewing, over-the-top, deliciously evil. Their villainy is taken to a theatrically high, overly dramatic threshold, and it crosses it, and it becomes so much fun to watch. And Austin Butler's villain is very much of that class. He's so much fun to watch. He looks insane. He talks insane. He makes weird noises when someone gets stabbed, like when you see your fajitas coming down the aisle and you know they're yours, like you ordered them, you see the smoke, and your mouth starts to like water a little bit. He does that when someone's like bleeding out on the floor. Those were my thoughts on Dune Part 2. I wanted to stay away from spoilers, so I kept it kind of vague, but I hope you found what I had to say interesting. Be sure to leave a comment where you give your thought on my thoughts. If you have any suggestions on how to make these videos better or more interesting or some format change, go ahead and leave those comments as well. I'll be interested to hear what you have to say. And like the video, of course, which they say that if you tell people to like the video, they're more likely to like the video. So let's see if that works. I'm going to keep doing it. And then, lastly, if you are not subscribed, please subscribe. In closing, all I have to say is that every day underground is a good day.
You've been fighting the Harkonnens for decades.
Look!
My family's been fighting them for centuries.
Your blood comes from dukes and great houses. Here, we're equal. What we do for the benefit of all.
Well, I'd very much like to be equal to you.
Maybe I'll show you the way.
deal with this prophet. Send assassins.
Feyd-Rautha, he's psychotic.
I see possible futures all at once. And in so many futures, our enemies prevail. But I do see a way. There is a narrow way through. My allegiance is to you. Do you believe me?
This is a form of power that our world has not yet seen. The ultimate power.
I want you to know I will love you as long as I breathe.
You will never lose me as long as you stay who you are.
Consider what you're about to do, Paul Atreides.
Silence!